pilot husband found out about my affair and took his revenge by making me homeless.
These past few days have had me worried and I can't think straight. Long story short, my life is falling apart and I can't put it back together. I would like to share my story with you guys so you won't make the same mistake as I did. I should have been patient with my marriage and not destroyed it by seeking someone else's touch. Hi Redditors, my name is Olivia and I just turned 25 years ago. It wasn't a celebratory birthday because that was when things started to get ruined. I can't remember my childhood memory and I don't know why, but I think it was never important. After all, our family didn't have much drama. We were a family of 3 based on the fact that I was the only child. The little memory I remember was that I had transferred school when I was 10 because they were renovating our house then, and it was going to take some time. My family stayed with some relatives until our house was completed. During that time, I know I met this boy and his name was Mark. Mark was this silent boy who didn't talk much to anyone around. We also attended the same school then, and I usually watched when they bullied him, but because he didn't talk or complain, they got tired and stopped. This particular day, someone pushed him and his bag fell to the ground and opened, so all the books fell out. I rushed over to him to help him with the packing, and that was how both of us started talking. He told me thank you, and I remember his tiny voice saying, "You're welcome." He was 2 years older than me, and he didn't talk much about himself, but he laughed at the things I said. The next day, we started going to school together because coincidentally, his house was close to that of our relatives. He was my childhood friend, not until 1 year passed by. I was 11 years already. My parents told me we were leaving and I threw a tantrum because I didn't want to leave. I think it was more of I didn't want to leave Mark because we were so close. I never even had the chance to tell Mark because it was so sudden. I cried all through the journey of us going back to our own place. There's a reason I'm telling you readers about Mark because he carries most of the story. When we got to the house, I still cried in my room. Months had passed then, and I put Mark at the back of my mind. I started another school, and that's the part I can't remember much. I turned 15, and I started high school. I didn't make any new friends or expect much from anyone because I had already set my mind to the fact that I shouldn't get attached or make very close friends because we were going to end up being apart. College started by the time I was 19, and that was where I met Henry, who was 20. Henry was a very gentle person in college, and I noticed he didn't like attention much. I met him in my second year of college in class. The lecturer gave us an assignment and left the class. Henry walked up to me and asked if I could teach him something because he noticed I was asking questions previously and it looked like I understood it. I laughed and told him I did understand it and I could teach him. I became his tutor after that and he passed the exams that we had. He thanked me and said he liked spending time with me. I also liked spending time with him and he asked me out on a date. I accepted and I learned some things about him. Henry told me his life story. He also came from a family of 3 just like me, and he was the only son. Both of us being the only child in the family was one of the things we had in common. He loved reading and playing video games, and I loved them too. He asked me what I wanted to become in 4 years' time, and I told him I had no idea because I really had none. I never thought that far about where I was going in life, and I just wanted to flow with whatever I was doing and see where it led me. He told me he wanted to be a pilot, and I thought about how it was great that he had a goal in mind. College was over and I was glad I was done with that. I was 22 years old by then. What I was glad about more was the fact that Henry and I had been together since second year started and nothing had come between us. I loved Henry so much and I wanted to spend my life with him. Or that's what I thought at first. My family had met with Henry's family because Henry insisted and wanted to take our relationship to the next level. One particular night, he told me we were going on a dinner date and told me to dress up. I did, and he took me to a fancy restaurant. Everything was going great, but what shocked me the most was when he got down on one knee and proposed. I was so surprised, and without any thinking, I told him yes. When I got engaged, he told me that he was working towards his goal of becoming a pilot, and he wanted to provide me with everything I wanted so we won't lack things. We discussed having kids, and both of us didn't want any, so we decided we weren't having any. I asked if the family would understand, but he said he didn't care because me and him were a family, and the decision was between us. We got married 5 months after he proposed to me, and the marriage was a huge one. We tried planning it, but both our families said it was a big moment, so they invited lots of their friends. I was tired by the time we finished the wedding and the reception, but I won't lie that it was an enjoyable moment. Henry had surprised me that night of our wedding that he bought an apartment for us. The first time I stepped in the house, I was amazed because it was a huge place. We settled into the house and life was going great. Henry said he was taking classes for his pilot lessons, but it was online just for training, so there were no complaints because he had my time. I think the changes started when he said he had to take physical classes. He would leave early because the training started early. I didn't know how pilots' trainings worked, but it sounded stressful. Most times when he left, it was so lonely in that big house, and I found myself thinking of random thoughts like, should I adopt a pet to be less lonely, and things like that. I decided to get a job because I couldn't sit down in the house all day waiting for Henry to come back. I studied accounting in college, so I figured I should at least use my degree for something. I ended up getting a job in the bank as an accountant, and it was stressful. The customers were annoying and not letting me think straight most times. I won't lie that most times I came to work, I poured my frustrations on the customers. By that, I mean if they talked to me with a tone or attitude, I gave them the same energy. This happened for 2 months, and it was like a cycle of Henry going for lessons and training while I went to work. I usually got back before him because he mostly arrived late at night and he was always tired. The only time I got his time was on a weekend because that was when he was free. I was about to tell him that I didn't like how he didn't have enough time for me because we just got married recently, and he didn't have my time. At the same time, I wanted to speak, but he said something too. I told him to go on first, and he started talking. He told me that he was going to be riding a plane for the first time, but as an assistant. He was very happy, so I didn't know how to inform him about how I felt. I didn't want to ruin his happy moment, so I kept it to myself. He was gone for 2 days, and I got worried that he didn't contact me, but I still went to work that day. His phone wasn't ringing, and I stayed up till 1 a.m. that day. He apologized and said he had to put his phone on airplane mode due to the interference. I guess I understood in a way, but it also sounded like an excuse, and I started thinking he didn't love me anymore. I focused on my accounting job for another 2 months, and things were the same. Henry told me his job was going great and he was no longer training. He was getting paid now, and I saw how excited he was when he told me. I still couldn't bring myself to say how lonely I felt, but I thought it didn't matter. Before I knew it, I turned 24 and I felt so empty. I wished things would change, and I think my wish came true. On one of my normal days at work, I heard we were going to get a new manager at work, and it was someone no one knew. Obviously, I didn't pay it much attention since I didn't take the job seriously and just wanted to use it to pass time. The manager came, but I didn't bother waiting to see who he was because I wanted to go home. The next day, my coworker informed me that the manager wanted to see me. That was very weird because I know I did nothing wrong, but I still thought maybe I made a little mistake with the accounts. The coworkers told me some things before I entered his office. They said I shouldn't get worried because they had met with him and he looked like a chilled person. They also said he had called some people in and he just wanted to know the people working under him. I thanked my coworker and knocked on the door. A voice said come in, and there was someone standing next to the window talking on the phone. I couldn't see his face well, but I waited for him to finish his call. He didn't look back, but he told me to sit down, and I did. 1 minute hadn't passed yet when he got off the call and sat down on his chair. I was able to get a good look at his face, and it clicked to me that he looked so familiar. He smiled, and I knew I recognized the person, but I didn't know who it was. He said my name and asked if it was me, and I said yes. Then he said his name was Mark. I can remember him fully now. Mark, the young timid kid I had met when I was 10, and now 14 years had passed, and we were meeting ourselves again, coincidentally. It was indeed a very small world. I put my hand over my face because I was shocked, and he laughed. We were friends for 1 year, but for some reasons, childhood friendship seems more real than the adult one you make immediately. I asked him if I could hug him due to the fact that we were friends when we were kids, and it was a memory we both couldn't forget. He said sure, and I hugged him. He said he still remembered how we were during our childhood and how he stopped seeing me one day and those days turned to years. He also said that he was looking through the workers' files and he was surprised when he saw my name. So he needed to confirm that it was me and not someone with the same name as me. He said he wanted to talk to me more, and he asked me if I was free after work. It was a Friday then, and I asked him if we could talk on Saturday, so he said no worries. I gave him my contacts, and he said he was going to call me. I got back home a bit excited that day, knowing that I had someone to talk to and I won't be lonely all the time. I was thinking I needed an excuse to tell my husband that I would be going out on his free day. But on Saturday, he told me that something came up and he had to go to work again and he wouldn't be back for some days. I told him there were no worries, and he kissed me. My husband left at 8 in the morning, but his work was due for 10. He usually went early most times, but I was glad this time. I went to clean up and waited for Mark's call. I was starting to think he wasn't going to call, but by 11 a.m., I saw an unknown number flash on my phone screen. I picked it and heard Mark's voice. He asked me if I knew anywhere we could go because he had just come to the city and he didn't know much. I told him there was a restaurant near the office and I would meet him there, so we agreed on that. It didn't take long for me to get there, but I couldn't see him anywhere. 5 minutes later, I saw him and I waved. He apologized for being late and said he had some issues with his car. He ordered food for both of us, and I began the conversation. I told him about the fact that I couldn't remember anything much, but I could remember when we were friends. I also told him about the whole house renovation we were doing then, and also the reason we suddenly moved. We discussed a lot of things. He told me that he also learnt accounting in school, and he was surprised after I told him I did the same. We laughed a lot, and it was satisfying because I was no longer feeling as lonely as I used to. I found myself wanting to talk to Mark more. He said something like it must have been fate that brought us together, and I couldn't agree less. I told him I got married and about my husband being a pilot. Mark congratulated me and said he had a girlfriend, but she broke up with him. The meeting with him was great, and we decided to meet up another time and day. Of course, I didn't tell my husband any of this because I thought there was no need, and it was just an outing with a childhood friend, so it was no big deal. The cycle with my husband continued, with him traveling all the time and coming back days later, with which he tells me about his journey. He said he's planning for both of us to have a vacation just by ourselves. We went on a honeymoon when we got married, but he wanted us to have fun by ourselves again. I said it was a great idea, and then he traveled again. In a way, I was happy about that because it meant I had time to go on another date with Mark. It wasn't a date per se, but I felt like it was one. Mark chose another date for us to meet, but this time it was in a fancy restaurant. I knew it was weird with the fact that I was a married woman going out with a man, but I saw it as just me going out with someone who was once my childhood friend. We talked more again, and I think I was getting drunk at one point. He noticed I was drunk, so he told me to calm down with the drinks, but I brushed him off and said I wasn't drunk. I should have listened to him because I remember I started talking about my married life when I was drunk. The memory is still a bit unclear, but I know I was spilling out how I was lonely in the relationship and how I didn't feel like Henry was still in love with me. I spilled out most things, and I can't even remember what it is. I tried going home that night, but he said that I was too drunk to drive, and he volunteered to drive me to his place since he stayed alone. I was about to protest, but I didn't, because if I had gone home, it was going to be lonely since Henry was not around. I accepted his ride, and he took me back to his place. I never imagined how his place was, but when I saw it, I realized that it was a small place, and somewhere I wanted to stay compared to the big house I was all alone in. I don't know what came over me when he placed me on the bed because I couldn't walk well. I know that I put my hands around his arms and pulled him in, which made him fall on the bed, and we both burst out in laughter. The next thing that happened felt like a dream when he came closer to my face and kissed me. I was married, and I thought I shouldn't be doing this, but I don't know what came over me, and I felt myself accepting the kiss. Till now, I still can't believe that I had slept with Mark. The next day, I woke up naked with the blankets wrapped around me, and I saw Mark standing over me. He sat beside me on the bed and apologized for what we did that night, but I told him it was not his fault. He said he knew I was married, and he shouldn't have crossed the boundaries. We said everything was all right and it was not going to happen again. We should have stopped there, and nothing should have happened after that. I couldn't tell my husband about it since it was just a silly mistake that happened. Mark asked me out again and said nothing was going to happen, but another cycle happened, and before I knew it, I ended up sleeping with him 3 times. It's unbelievable, I know, and I wished I had stopped it. There was just something about Mark that was different. It was something Henry didn't give me. We wanted to stop what we were doing because it was exactly an affair, and each time we said it would stop, we ended up sleeping together again. I did it with my husband too, but it felt different with Mark. It was something I hated and loved at the same time. We weren't mixing business with pleasures. In our free time, we went on different dates, but I planned it well so I wouldn't get caught by my husband. You know the saying that goes every day for the thief and one day for the owner? Well, yes, I got caught. How I got caught feels like a dream anytime I think of it. I didn't want to go out that day, but I was supposed to meet up with Mark. I was strangely tired and didn't want to do anything. My husband left early that morning for work again, and he wasn't supposed to come back till another 2 days' time. I invited Mark over because I saw it as a great chance since I was free. We said we were not going to do anything, but before we knew it, we had already started kissing on the bed, and I was on top of him naked. I don't know how I didn't hear the main door open, but I heard Henry's voice come from behind me. He said something in the terms of what the heck is going on, but with more insulting words. I could tell he was very upset, and anyone would be upset if they saw their wife on top of another man. I told Mark to leave, and he packed his clothes and ran out of the room while I saw Henry give him a deadly look. I told him I could explain and that it was a mistake. He didn't say anything, but I could see his face fuming with anger. I asked him what he was doing back at home when he just left, and he said the plane he was supposed to fly out was undergoing maintenance and the work was postponed. He also said that he had been thinking that he wasn't spending time with me and he was happy to come back home to spend time with me, but he wasn't annoyed at me anymore. He was just disappointed. That was heart-wrenching to hear. It would have been better for him to be upset with me than disappointed because those words felt heartbreaking. I know I deserved what happened, but that wasn't where it ended. He asked me how long it had been going on, and I came clean with him, telling him the truth. There was no use hiding it from him anymore. As expected, the next words he said was that he wanted a divorce. I expected him to say that, but I begged him, saying we could make our marriage better. I told him I messed up and I deserved this, but he should reconsider the divorce. The next day, he said the plane was fixed and he was going to be gone for a week. He said by the time he got back, I should have moved out of the house. I begged him, but he didn't listen. I can't go back to my family housed in shame. I'm still trying to contact Mark, but he isn't picking up his calls. Update. There's not much update to give. My marriage life is ruined. I contacted Mark and he told me to not call him anymore. He said he didn't want to get caught up in any mess. I told him I just needed a place to stay, but he said he wanted nothing to do with me. I didn't know Mark had this side to him. Henry came back like he said he would. He was wondering why I hadn't packed my bags, but he said he suspected I wouldn't have. He also came back with divorce papers because, in his words, it would chase me away and do the job quicker. And I was devastated. He was going to take everything we had and it was all going to belong to him. I complained and said it wasn't fair, but he said I had no right to say that, considering how much I had cheated on him. I didn't know that he had also informed my parents because some hours later, I had more than 10 missed calls and different messages from my family and his family. I talked to my mom, and she told me she was ashamed of me. I signed the divorce papers because I had no choice, and I left the house. I am currently at my parents' house, but they aren't talking to me. I wish I could go back to the beginning to change things, but I can't. I hope the readers out there won't cheat on their partner all because they weren't giving you attention and you were lonely. Learn from my mistakes.
Hey folks, Jeffrey here. I'm your typical Floridian guy with a passion for gardening. As a gardener, I've got calluses on my hands, and the Florida sun's baked my skin to a tough tan. I'm the kind of guy who's always believed in straight talk and hard work. But enough about me, let me tell you about my life, which up until recently, I would have sworn was as close to perfect as it gets. I live in a cozy corner of Sarasota with my wife Sharon, who teaches biology at the local high school, and our 2 amazing kids. It's funny how life throws you curveballs. You think you've got the measure of things, then bam, the game changes. It started with Sharon. She's always been as reliable as a Swiss watch. Lately though, she's been off. Missing dinner because of unexpected meetings, her phone buzzing more than a beehive at odd hours of the night. And then there's Mike, good old Mike, her colleague from the science department, who's apparently developed a sudden interest in our garden's health. When I'm not around, of course. Now, I'm not the suspicious type, but even I know that when your kids start talking about mommy's friend who makes her laugh a lot, you don't need to be Sherlock to smell something's fishy. The kids, bless their hearts, are as subtle as a hurricane. They'd mentioned, in between their stories of school and cartoons, how Mike was really funny and mommy liked to bake him cookies. Just for him. A cookie or two, I can understand. But when your son asks why Mike visits so often when daddy's at work, well, that gets the old noggin firing up, doesn't it? Stay tuned, my friends. I got a feeling this rabbit hole goes deeper, and I'm just about to peek in. Hey everyone. Unfortunately, basically everyone who is watching these videos isn't subscribed. It would mean the world to me to quickly get out of the full screen video for 3 seconds and press that subscribe button. It's free, and you can unsubscribe anytime. Sorry for bothering, and thank you so much if you subscribed. Alright guys, it's Jeffrey again. Buckle up because things just got real weird, real fast. Picture this, I'm there on the living room floor, Xbox controllers in hand, diving into a gaming session with the kiddos. It's our thing, you know, just a dad and his kids, bonding over pixelated adventures. We're laughing, trash-talking, just having a good old time. Then, out of nowhere, while we're navigating through some fantasy world, my daughter, the sweet little 9-year-old she is, drops a bombshell. Daddy, why does Mike go to mommy's bedroom when you're trimming Mrs. Henderson's overgrown hedges? My son, the ever-observant 11-year-old, chimes in, yeah, they were playing a game too, but it looked weird. I'm telling you, my heart didn't just drop, it did a nosedive right through the floor. At first, I laugh at it off. Kids say the darndest things, right? But the look in their eyes, that innocent questioning stare, kids don't lie about stuff like this. They don't even know they should. So there I am, a grown man, feeling like I've just taken a shovel to the gut. I'm furious, confused, and feeling a kind of hurt that's a stranger to me. I'm not the kind to show my kids anything but smiles and strength, so I muster up the calmest voice I can and tell them, let's put a pin in this game for now, champ and sweetheart. Daddy needs to step out for a bit. I head to my local cafe because, frankly, I'm one wrong thought away from losing it. The cafe boss, a burly guy with a heart of gold who's known me since high school, sees my face and motions me over without a word. We sit, and I spill everything, every last detail while he listens, brewing me the strongest cup of joe I've ever had. He doesn't say much, just gives me that solid, knowing nod. Jeff, you know what you gotta do, right? He says. And I nod because, yeah, I do know. But man, nothing prepares you for this kind of storm. Not in a million years. Stay tuned, folks. This story's far from over. First things first, I start paying a little more attention to the details. You know, the ones that slip by when life's rolling along as usual. Like how Sharon's always got her phone on her, like it's some kind of top secret device. And her computer, password protected out of nowhere. Then, there are the receipts. Little slips of paper, whispering stories of dinners for two when she said she was dining with the ladies from school. One night when Sharon's out at one of her meetings, I decide to play it cool and give her a call. Hey hon, just wondering when you'll be home? I ask, voice casual. The pause before she answers, telltale. Oh, running late, lots of papers to grade, she says, but I can hear it, the faintest sound of clinking glasses in the background. The rage is there, yeah, but it's wrapped tight in a cocoon of sorrow. It's a heavy, dragging thing that follows me around, whispering doubts and anger in my ear. Every time I look at Sharon, I see lies. When she smiles at me, I see deception. It's the gaslighting that really gets to me, though. Like when I mention Mike's frequent visits and she laughs, saying I'm imagining things that they're just friends. Or when I find a man's watch under our bed, one I've never seen before, and she tells me it's an early birthday present for me. I wasn't born yesterday, Sharon. So there I am, collecting these shreds of betrayal, feeling like I'm in one of those crime shows. Except, this isn't TV, and there's no script to follow. Just a guy who thought he had it all, realizing he might be about to lose everything. So I waited for Sharon to come home, her heels clicking against the tile like a timer counting down. When she saw the look on my face, that smile slipped right off. I didn't waste any time, didn't play any games. I laid it all out. Every receipt, every whisper of a rumor, every damn timestamp that didn't add up. And that watch, that shiny symbol of betrayal I found under our bed. The room felt like it was vibrating with my rage. I stood there, a man betrayed, a man whose trust had been shattered like a glass thrown against a wall. "Sharon," I said, my voice like gravel, "don't even try to deny it." And you know what? She didn't. The floodgates opened, and out it all poured. The lies turned to confessions. The secrets turned to admissions. Mike this, Mike that. She was crying, but the tears didn't move me, not anymore. I told her, "You're going to tell me where he lives." My voice was steel, my resolve absolute. I was ready to tear this guy apart with my bare hands. And she saw it, the fury in my eyes, the set of my jaw. She knew I wasn't a man to be tested. She spilled the details, voice trembling. She begged me not to go, pleaded with me that it was over, that it was a mistake. But a mistake made one too many times stops being a mistake and becomes a choice. So there I was, with the truth burning a hole in my pocket and revenge singing like a siren in my ears. This was it, the moment of truth, and I had a decision to make. "Okay guys, it's Jeffrey again. You know when you're about to get into a big fight and your heart's pumping so hard you can hear it? That was me, waiting for Sharon to get home. My head was spinning with all the stuff I'd found out, and I was ready to let it all out. She walked in, all smiles, but that smile dropped when she saw my face. I didn't waste any time. "We gotta talk," I said, and slapped the phone records on the table. I'd circled all the calls to Mike's number in red so she could see them clear as day. For a second, it was super quiet. Then she looked at me, and I could tell she knew the game was up. "Jeffrey, I can explain," she started, but I wasn't about to sit through another round of lies. "Cut the crap, Sharon," I snapped. "The kids have been talking, you know. They've seen you and Mike, so just spill it." The next part was like watching a dam break in slow motion. She started crying, saying it was all a big mistake, that she didn't mean to hurt me. I felt like laughing. A mistake? No, what she did was way more than that. I was so mad I could barely see straight. I thought about this guy, Mike, laughing behind my back, thinking he could mess with my life. "Where does he live?" I demanded. I wanted to see the fear on his face when he realized I knew. Sharon was crying harder now, begging me to let it go, but that wasn't going to happen. I kept at it until she gave up his address between sobs and sniffles. So there I was, standing in the middle of our broken life. Sharon was a mess, but I couldn't feel sorry for her. Not after what she did. Everything we had was turned upside down because she couldn't be honest. I knew what I had to do next. This wasn't just about yelling and screaming. This was about setting things right. And maybe that meant having a face-to-face with Mike. "Hey Reddit, Jeffrey here. After the showdown with Sharon, I didn't just sit around. I had plans, and I was going to make sure everyone knew the kind of person Sharon really was. First off, I made a few calls. One to her school principal, a buddy of mine, to give him a heads up about the kind of morals his biology teacher had. Then, I had chats with a couple of Sharon's friends. You know, just dropped some hints about the rumors going around. Didn't take long for the news to spread like wildfire. Gossip in our small town moves faster than a gator on the prowl. It wasn't long before Sharon's perfect little world started to crumble. Her friends, they turned their backs on her one by one. Her job? Let's just say she had to take an extended leave due to the personal issues becoming too much of a distraction. Then came the custody battle. I was like a dog with a bone. I wasn't gonna let go. I got myself the toughest lawyer in town and we went to work. I showed the judge all the evidence, laid it out straight. I talked about how I wanted to make sure my kids had a stable home with a parent they could count on. The court sessions were brutal. Sharon tried to paint a picture of regret, of a mother who made one mistake, but I wasn't having any of it. This was about what was best for the kids, and I made sure the judge knew it. It took time and it wasn't easy, but I got what I wanted: full custody. Watching Sharon as the judge gave the ruling, I saw everything: her shock, her desperation. But the kids were my priority. and I had to do what was best for them. So there it is. Sharon's life turned into a train wreck, but I got my kids. They're the only good thing to come out of this mess. And me? I'm just trying to move on, to build a life where we can forget about all the hurt and lies. The fallout was tough, but we're getting through it one day at a time. Sharon, well, she got what she deserved, as harsh as that sounds. You play with fire, you're gonna get burned. After I got everything sorted with Sharon and the kids, there was still one thing eating at me: Mike. I had his address burning a hole in my pocket and a head full of rage. So, I decided it was time for a little visit. I rolled up to Mike's place, a neat little house with a 2-car garage and a lawn that could use some of my expertise. The moment he opened the door and saw me, his face went white as a sheet. "We need to talk," I said, pushing past him into the house. The look on his face was priceless, a mix of fear and guilt. I didn't come here to chat, though. I came for answers and maybe a little bit more. Mike started with the apologies, the excuses, but I wasn't buying it. "Save it," I told him. "You knew she was married." That's when things got heated. Mike made the mistake of trying to shove me out, but I wasn't having any of that. We went at it, right there in his fancy living room with the big screen TV and family photos staring down at us. I'm not proud of it, but let's just say Mike got a taste of how a betrayed husband throws a punch. In the scuffle, a lamp crashed to the floor, and that's when his wife came running in. She screamed, seeing us tangled up on the floor, me on top, and Mike looking like he regretted all his life choices. She didn't waste any time and called the cops. While we waited for the boys in blue, I told her everything. The affair, the lies, all of it. You could see her world shattering with every word. By the time the cops showed up, Mike was nursing a bloody nose, and his marriage was in pieces on the floor, just like that broken lamp. The cops took our statements and I laid it all out, the whole sordid story. Mike didn't say much, just sat there looking like a man who'd lost everything, which he had. His wife was crying, asking him if it was true, and all he could do was nod. I left Mike's house with the cops, my hands shaking, my heart pounding. I was still angry, sure, but it felt like I'd let out some of the poison that had been building up inside me. After all that drama, I put all my energy into the two things that mattered most: my kids and my job. The gardens never looked better, and I swear those plants can feel when you're tending to them with a clear head. And the kids? They're doing great. We've had our share of tough talks and tearful nights, but we're getting through it together. As for Sharon, well, she's been on a bit of a downward slide. Last I heard, she's been trying to stitch her life back together, but it hasn't been easy. She's reached out, tried to make amends, but I can't find it in me to hear her out. Maybe that makes me cold, but when trust is broken like that, it changes things for good. A few months down the line, I'm sitting here, and it's like I can finally breathe again. I've learned a lot about myself, about karma, and about how life has a way of balancing the scales. Cutting Sharon out was like cutting out a piece of my own history, but it was necessary. It was either that or keep living a lie, and that's not how I roll. For anyone out there who finds themselves in a similar spot, here's my 2 cents. Be strong, be decisive. And remember, you gotta look out for yourself and your own, because at the end of the day, you're the one who has to live with your choices. So, yeah, justice, if that's what you want to call it, has been served, at least in my book. I've got a whole new appreciation for the quiet moments, a cold beer after a long day, and the sound of my kids laughing in the backyard. The road's been rough, but I'm still standing. And that's something to be proud of. Thanks for listening, Reddit. Jeffrey, over and out. Thanks for listening. If you would subscribe, that would mean the world to me. Have a good rest of your day or night.